Hello there and welcome. So one question I get asked every now and then by learner riders is, which foot should I put down? So just a very short video just to explain that question and just give you some thoughts. So at the moment I'm on a roundabout, as you can see, and I'm trapped in heavy traffic. I can't really escape. I could go around the front of this silver one, but it's a bit dangerous if she moves forward. So at the moment my brake foot is up and I'm holding the machine on the rear brake. Now I'm stationary for some period of time, so I'm going to make a consideration. Do I want to be in neutral? And I am. So I'm going to swap feet and I'm going to lift my gear foot up, relax the clutch and put my brake foot down and hold the bike on a front brake. Now for learner motorcycles we often recommend you don't do that, because sometimes they get a little bit flustered and you might forget to put it in gear, and if you're on your test that's not very helpful. For me, I'm keeping that gear foot up and I can go straight into gear whenever I choose. Now I did sit here for a short while with the other foot up, so my brake foot was up, so I was holding the machine on the rear brake. I was in gear, and the reason I did that was I wasn't sure what was happening all around me, didn't know how long I was going to be here, so my default was to hold the bike in gear on the rear brake in case I could move. Now I was also concerned, would I be shunted from the rear on the roundabout, so I decided to keep the bike in gear so that I could move if necessary. But once we knew we were at a stalemate, I could relax and put it in neutral. Now I can see the guy up there who's holding the traffic up has just moved his stop board go to green. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it in gear. Now I could put my brake foot up, but as an experienced rider I'm not going to bother. Learner riders very often would swap their feet to cover it on the rear brake. So learner riders would very often, once they put the bike in gear, swap the foot, so bring the right foot up onto the rear brake so they had good throttle control and so that they are ready to move away. As an experienced rider, or a rider that's confident if you like, got good abilities, you don't have to do that. So it's like here, we're coming into a set of traffic lights, which foot am I going to put down? So I'm going to use my rear brake to come to a gentle stop. I'm offering the left foot out and stopping gently. And that's what we'd expect normally to see from a CBT or a direct access learner motorcyclist. And we'd sit at the traffic lights in gear, and I'm sitting in gear because I'm just watching that BMW coming behind. Is he going to shunt me? No, he's not. That traffic's moving, so I can swap feet if I wish and relax into neutral. I know a lot of advanced motorcyclists will come into a set of traffic lights, know they're going to be stationary for more than a moment, and they'll stop exclusively on the front brake, put the right foot down and keep the left foot up and have a neutral. And that's fine. It's not a problem. So when you're thinking about what foot you actually want to put down, you have to think the purpose and the reason of what you're trying to achieve. Now especially for new bikers, the rear brake for final stops and slow work is much better and much highly recommended over the front brake. Although if you've been trained correctly you will know that for normal stops it's front brake, back brake, slow or to stop. But at low speeds you can use the rear brake only to stop because it is sufficient, and the front brake don't need all that power. So in that respect that's quite simple. As a new rider, you'll always be told, keep your brake foot up, put your gear foot down, and don't worry about having a neutral. When you become more experienced, when you start looking at advanced work, they'll get you to think a little bit more deeply into it. But as a new rider, are there other things that you need to think about that may dictate to you which foot's going to come down, and goes against the normal instructor advice of keep your brake foot up? And I have heard some instructors say keep your brake foot up all the time. I'm not a lover of all the time, must do all the time, whatever wording you want to choose. It's always this way, because I don't believe anything is always that way. A good motorcyclist, a good road user will always be inquisitive. They will be a thinking operator, if you like. It's like here, I'm going to just stay well back and just see what's going on. I might have to move forward fairly rapidly. I'm just making sure that we've got opportunities. So I know as a learner you've got a lot to think about when you're first learning to ride a motorcycle, especially if you're not generally a motorised road user. Not so bad if you're only a car driver, been on roads for years, but you've got a brand new machine to operate, and you've got to think about that quite a bit, as well as thinking about the road. And so I know instructors don't want to over confuse and make you overthink so that you may miss out on other important parts. But let's look at something that actually could be very important and you do need to consider. So at this junction here we've got a little bit of an incline. I'm going to turn right and I'm going to use that rear brake to control the machine. It's a little bit of a hill start maybe, only a small one here, but I'm just controlling the machine on the back brake, and if I did stop I would have put my gear foot down because I needed to control the machine with the rear brake. It was quite desirable. So we can see this road here, quite a nice gradient, quite a strong gradient, and we can see at the end of the road there's a junction, and in planning to stop, what is the best brake? Well, we're going to be doing a hill start if we stop at this junction. So as per learner training, it's going to be both brakes to start with, then losing the front, staying with the rear, coming to a gentle stop, and actually this junction levels out. So what happens if I take the foot off the brake? Nothing actually. But the planning was, if it was going to be a proper hill start, I'd be holding it on the rear brake. Now we do know that more experienced motorcyclists can do front brake hill starts. So in other words, we'd hold it maybe on a couple of fingers or 4 fingers. We'd raise the gas and then ease off the brake and bring the power on. We're never going to ask a learner or a new motorcyclist to do that. It's quite a tricky little technique until you're conversant with your bike. We're always going to ask the learner to do a hill start on the rear brake. Now let's have a look at this road that we're approaching here. We're just approaching a junction and I intend to turn right. I can already see that there's a hill, and to the right the hill is going up the gradient, and if I look at the road layout, and I've got quite a heavy bike, if you look at the road layout you can see how it falls away. Now normally the learner would put the left foot down. Now if you look at that bit of road there, if I put my left foot down, that suggests my bike could tip over. So I'm going to have to stop very gently on a front brake and put the right foot down. And that's a classic example of why we have to think carefully at certain junctions, what foot am I going to put down? There's no way I was putting my left foot down there, and if I was riding my old GS the situation would be even worse, because the bike's a lot taller and some people's legs are a bit shorter and you get all these different combinations. But what's so important with something like that is when you've got to stop on your front brake because you've got to put your brake foot down, you cannot be harsh or firm or aggressive with the front brake. It must be used with the utmost sensitivity. So the camber of the road can have a major effect on which brake which you use to stop and which foot you decide to put down as a result. Never assume you're always just going to be able to put the foot down as per default training. Always look at the bigger picture. So like in this traffic queue, I'm trying not to stop at all, but every now and then I do have to stop. It's just a given. I'm going to control the bike on the rear brake, slow speed control, and if I do need to stop, the gear foot, the left foot, is going to come down to support the machine, and I'm going to cover that rear. I'm not going to touch the front brake at all. That might vary if I decided the traffic queue was so long and stationary that I would have to stop for a long period of time. So for a normal stop where you're going to park up, how are you going to stop? So the option is, as you pull over, you're going to use both brakes, come down through the gears, and I'm going to just stop on the front brake, stick it into neutral, turn it off. And that's an option you can use if you know you're going to stop and park up, and you can immediately put your brake foot down. For a new rider, the risk is, as already discussed, if you use that front brake inappropriately, you can make the weight go to the front of the machine, to the side of the machine, and the bike can drop. I know some people have written to me or spoken to me in the past about riding bigger bikes, even bikes like these RTs, and they said, I'm afraid of dropping the bike when I stop. And the main causation of that will be that you're using the front brake too firmly. So if you train your front brake to be very smooth and very gentle, you really reduce the chances of that bike falling on the floor. So as you can see there, I can stop without using that rear brake, purely use the front. Now that's an advanced technique if you want a better description. For those of you in the UK who are learners, you don't want to be doing that on your test and on your CBT. You want to be following your instructions where you're using that rear brake a lot. So, as a learner motorcyclist, what you should be doing is recommended. You're going to use both brakes together, front and back, coming down the gears, and as you come to a stop, ease off the front, stay with the back. Your left foot, your gear foot, comes down to support the motorcycle. Now you're stopped and you're safe. Now, if you want to turn off, cover the front brake, swap feet, pop into neutral, engine off. That is a safer technique for a newer motorcyclist. So one thing I am going to mention about which foot that we put down is really for the interest of those who have done advanced motorcycle training or used to ride a bike many years ago and who have heard of a thing called the Hendon Shuffle. Now the Hendon Shuffle is a little name given to a technique taught by the Metropolitan Police Motorcycle Training School up at Hendon. And I'm just going to pull over to talk about it. So apparently what you do is you would stop using both brakes, you then swap your feet, you then have a neutral, and then you bring your brake foot back up, and then when you wanted to move away you'd pop your foot down, pop it into gear, put your brake foot back up and ride on. So your feet are going up and down, up and down. And it's sort of seen with amusement in the advanced world these days. One of the things I used to say was the reason for it is that if you're in a traffic queue and you have a neutral, if you're holding the motorcycle on the front brake and you're hit from behind, the bike will raise at the rear and flip you over. Now, I'm not so sure if I agree with that. I tend to think that whether you're holding the bike in a traffic queue on the front brake or on the rear brake, if you're hit from behind, I think the first thing you're going to do is your body's going to go backwards and you're going to let go of whatever you're holding, whether it be the front brake or the foot brake. I think the impact will break the bond of the tyres on the road and the bike will slide forward and go straight onto the floor on its side. It may be catapulted to some degree out into the junction on its tyres before going sideways. I don't know if I personally think that there's much relevance in difference between holding a bike on the front brake in a traffic queue and a rear brake. Do you need to shuffle your feet up and down, up and down? No, I don't think you do. If you want to hold the machine on the front brake and wait to put the machine in gear like a lot of advanced motorcyclists do now, that's fine. If you want to stop in the almost learner style, and you may decide that stopping on the rear brake with the front brake is desirable because of the road surface, and if you then choose to select a neutral and shuffle your feet, then so be it. As we've already discussed, one size doesn't fit all, and if you know why you're doing something and you're applying it to the circumstances at that moment in time, then I think that's quite reasonable. So a quick recap then. Generally speaking, if you're a learner motorcyclist, the best rule of thumb is to keep your brake foot up and put your gear foot down, although just be aware there may be circumstances where that can change. once you've passed your test, we will ask you to look at other options in training and think about other reasons why maybe you should do something different. So one question I get asked as well in regards to which foot do I put down, is there ever a situation where I can put both feet down? And as a general rule, I'd say don't put both feet down because it doesn't really serve any purpose. However, if you look at a junction like this, can't see past those cars, I don't mind, once having come to a stop with your brake foot up, if you put your brake foot down, you've now got 2 feet on the ground, so you've allowed the brake to control the machine. Now you can gently use the clutch and gently walk the bike out to get your view past the cars, and then you can ride on. So in my view, the only time really that both feet should go on the ground is once you've come to a stop. You can put both feet down to enable you to walk out to look past what we call there a closed junction, where you haven't got a view of the main carriageway. An experienced motorcyclist may well use slow speed control and come out with 1 foot up, or both feet up in fact. But if you are a new rider, nothing wrong with popping both feet down and having a little gentle walk out using the clutch to propel the bike forward gently on that biting point. So until next time, ride safe and take care.